Welcome to Gut Punch, the podcast that explores life-changing moments. Hosted by Kathryn Lancioni, a seasoned educator with personal insights into resilience. Kathryn shares how life can change in an instant, shaping our path forward. Each episode features inspiring guests who face their own gut punch moments. Guests share their journeys through loss, upheaval, and triumph. What to expect: honest conversations, lessons in resilience, inspiration for growth. Join Kathryn as she highlights courage and perseverance in every story. Gut Punch is a reminder that there is always a path forward. Be part of the conversation. Register now to join Kathryn for today's journey.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Gut Punch. My name is Kathryn Lancioni, and I'm the host for today's episode. Today, we'll be joined by Tess Millay, who has an incredible story to share with us. She'll talk about what happened, how she got through it, and most importantly, what she's learned. So Tess, thank you for being on the show this afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
So before we get into the Gut Punch, if you could share a little bit about your background with everybody, that would be great.
Sure. Well, currently I'm a wife and a mother of a 12-year-old. I'm an author and a public speaker. I have spent years traveling and speaking throughout the U.S., Europe, and Asia. I spent time in the Middle East as a director of advocacy, working with some of the most severely traumatized survivors of one of the world's most violent terrorist groups. Yeah, that's just a little bit of a background.
Wow, I'm so intrigued by your background and your story. So let's just cut right to it. Talk to us about your gut punch. What happened?
Well, when I had turned 21, I was raised in a very sheltered and loving Christian home.
Okay.
And I couldn't wait until I was old enough to get out on my own. And so when I turned 21, that time had finally come and I was excited.
Yep.
So I was planning to, I got a job as the manager of a cosmetic line in a mall. So this was a mall in our area that was considered a good part of town and considered to be safe. And 1 week into this job, I started having these horrible nightmares. And I didn't really understand why I was having these nightmares, but it was like something was going to happen. Maybe I was going to be attacked. I really didn't know, but I didn't understand why I was having them because violence had never been a part of my life up to this point. So on this particular day, it was my responsibility to open up my department. So when we would open up, we would come into the store at 9 a.m., which was an hour before the mall opened. So all those front parking spots would be available. But we were told that as employees that we were never to park in any of those front parking spots. Those were to be saved for the customers. So we were to go into the very back of the parking lot and park in the very back parking spots.
And I think that, I worked at a mall when I was about that age, and that was kind of the same direction I was given. That's standard. That happens everywhere.
Very common. That's right. So, but that morning when I came into the parking lot, because I'd been having those nightmares, I was feeling really uneasy and uncomfortable. So I parked in the very first parking spot closest to the entrance.
Okay.
Right. Got out of my car and went to go in, and the guard who had let us into the store noticed where I had parked and reminded me of the guidelines and told me to go get back in my car and go into the very back of the parking lot and park. Being taught to do what I was told to do against my better judgment, that's exactly what I did. So I got back in my car, parked in the back of the parking lot, went in. The mall opened at 10. And at 1 o'clock, I was sure to let my coworkers know that I was going on my lunch break and that I would be back. And so I wasn't really thinking about my life as I walked to my car that day. I was feeling happy and at peace with how things were going and my prospects for the future. But what I didn't know as I walked to my car that day was that in just moments, something would happen that would shatter my life in a way that I never thought possible. As I reached my car in the parking lot, I opened my car door and I barely settled into the seat. And that's when the man struck. So he came out of nowhere.
Was he in the car?
No, he had come up. He was hiding between the cars and he came up when I sat down into my car. So he started coming up, but I couldn't see him until he was ascending upon me. And I caught just a glimpse of him on my left side as I felt the entire weight of his body ascend on me, forcing me down into the car, into the seats. So I was screaming and doing everything that I could to try to get out from underneath him and try to get out of the car. And that was when I felt something very sharp and hard hit me right on the temple, and it was his gun. And that was when everything for me, the fast moving struggle stopped and everything just went into slow motion. And the next thing I know, blood is streaming down my face. This man is shoving his silver gun into my face and saying, shut up, stop screaming. I have a gun and I'll use it. And everything's still moving slow motion. The next thing I know, he's pulling me up next to him in the car. And before I knew it, he's driving my car with his left hand and he has pulled me up next to him. He has my arm under his right arm and his gun shoved into my knee.
Wow.
Yeah. So my mind was struggling to comprehend what was happening. I mean, all I could think was, is this really happening? How,
And you're 21 years old. And what time of day is this when this is occurring?
1:30 in the afternoon. So broad daylight.
Yeah.
But I was far enough back in the parking lot that nobody could hear me
Yeah.
when I was screaming and struggling. So everything was still moving in slow motion in my mind as he drove off. And I was just living in the middle of a horrific nightmare. And as
Yes.
my mind began to clear, the full gravity of the situation became clear. And I thought, I'm going to die today. And I cried out, God help me, and was told to shut up by my captor. So it happened that fast. So
Yes.
one moment I was fine, I was safe, going about my everyday. And the next moment I had been successfully abducted.
So, okay, so it's 1:30 in the afternoon. You think you're going to die. He's driving away your car. You're sitting there. You're completely helpless. What happened next?
Well, so as we drove on, there wasn't much talking because he was trying to keep me under his control. And I was trying to formulate a plan of escape somehow. I didn't know how that would happen since he had me pretty well pinned in.
And did he say like where he was taking you or why he had abducted you? Was anything said?
No, he didn't say. He did ask where I was going. And I told him. It was almost as if he was just trying to assess if somebody was waiting for me,
Okay.
if there was any accountability for where I would be. And unfortunately, there really wasn't.
Yeah.
So I tried to take note and like pay it, note of him because I'd always heard that's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And aside from his crazed demeanor, what really struck me was just how normal he appeared.
Did you? So did he have did he have a mask on his face or something covering or could you see everything?
No, he had sunglasses on.
Okay.
He had a blues brother type of sunglasses on.
Yeah.
Other than that, no, he wasn't covered at all. And in fact, he appeared normal in every other way. So he was in his probably in his mid-30s.
Okay.
He's about 6 feet tall,
Yep.
slightly spunky, strawberry blonde hair. He was wearing jeans, tennis shoes, and a nylon jacket. So he could have been anyone. Like he could be your neighbor, your coworker.
Yeah.
Right? The guy behind you in the grocery store. There was just really nothing that I saw in him that would have signaled him a threat had I seen him anywhere else.
Wow. Okay. So he asks if anyone's waiting for you. You say no. Then what happens?
Well, as we drove on, there wasn't a lot of talking at first. But at one point, he told me he'd been watching me. And then I realized that I had seen him the day before sitting in his black pickup truck with a newspaper spread out over the steering wheel. And he was watching me walk to my car.
Wow.
And at the time, I just didn't think anything of it. I'm 21, I'm young, I'm naive. I didn't think anything of that. I figured maybe he was just a husband waiting for his wife
Yes.
while she shopped. But now I realized that he was in that pickup truck watching me and planning his attack.
Waiting for you. He was a predator. Yeah.
He was. Yes, he was.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah. And so, there was talk here and there. He had mentioned that he was wanted in Florida, that he had a wife and a sister, all very odd. I didn't know why he was telling me these things. But eventually, he reached his planned location, which was on a deserted side road surrounded by a wooded area.
Yep.
And he stopped. And this was it. So he grabbed me and he dragged me across the driver's seat and out of the car. And he drug me through, pulled in. I mean, it wasn't like he just took me into the woods. He was pulling me. I was trying to get away.
Yeah.
He pulled me to the wooded area. And the next thing I know, we're into this wooded area and into a little clearing that was surrounded by woods. There was a rusty pickup truck in the middle of the clearing. clearly inoperable, no tires, very old weeds growing up around it. And there was this small house off in the distance. And I didn't know. I figured, I don't know, maybe he lived here. I didn't know. Strangely, like as I looked around that peaceful clearing, all I could think was, this is where they'll find my body. And
wow.
I thought of my parents and how painful that would be for them. And then that thought was quickly reinforced by the reality as my abductor grabbed my hair, shoved me up against that pickup truck, put the gun to my head and said, I am going to rape you and then I'm going to kill you. And during this struggle, his sunglasses had fallen off. So I found myself looking into the eyes of this very evil man. And at that very moment, I knew that was what was going to happen next would be unbearable. And it was.
So I'm not going to ask you to share what happened next because we can all kind of guess or surmise. But after what happened next, what then happened? How did this horror come to an end for you?
Well, I was fighting and doing everything I could. So at one point, I managed to lunge forward and knock the gun out of his hand. And when he bent down to get it, I took off running through the woods. And before you know it, he was behind me, running after me. And he punched me in a way or hit me in a way that I flew through the air and landed on the ground. And that's where he continued beating me. You know, I'm 5'2". I weighed 105 pounds. And so my attacker was a good at least 9 inches taller than me and weighed twice my weight. So no matter how hard I fought, I just was not able to get away.
Yeah.
Right. And so when he was done with what he had planned for me, he just left me laying there in my in my blood right there. And
And are your clothes, are you naked, clothes off, like the whole?
clothes are off. Yes, clothes are off.
You're laying there naked in a field in your own blood, having just endured the absolute most horrible thing to ever have happened to an individual.
Yes, and I had been terribly beaten by this time and had lost a lot of blood. Yeah. And he stood over me with his gun. And a little bit later, he was almost surprised that I was still alive. And at that point, I just thought, you know, if I start talking to him, then he's not beating and he's not killing. And I don't know, maybe I might have a chance.
Yeah.
So later that day, I was able to get away.
How?
Well, it's kind of interesting and it's a little bit hard to describe, but I do describe it in my book. So basically, I started talking to him and I thought, you know, I would tell him that he hadn't done anything wrong, and so he wouldn't have any reason to kill me because he hadn't done anything wrong. I just wanted to go home, and home was, you know, a ways away. So if he, you know, if he would just let me go, and you know, of course, he refused, and that was not something that he was willing to do. And I just started reasoning with him, like, you know, you're wanted in Florida. You know, if you kill me, then you're wanted in Indiana as well. You know where I live, and so just started just kind of trying to reason with him, which was very difficult. And his rage, because he had had a lot of rage, had kind of turned into more of he was calmer.
Okay.
And a little bit confused. He also became a little bit confused off and on, not the whole time. And so I just continued talking to him. The next thing I know, he grabbed me. He started dragging me back through the woods, and I saw my dress laying there, and I managed to grab a corner of it, and he dragged me to the edge of the woods. Then he ordered me to put my dress back on, which I was thrilled to do that because then at least I was covered again. But it was very hard to do because I had been beaten so badly. And he then picked me up like I was a rag doll and took me and put me back into the car. And the way he did it was he laid me across the seat. So it was a bench seat.
And this is your car he's putting you back into, right?
This is my car. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's a bench seat. So he lays me down in the seat and he lays my head in his lap. He puts his forearm over my neck and the gun to my side, and I started driving. And I didn't know where he was going, and he wasn't saying anything, and I didn't know what was going to happen at that point.
So do you remember what thoughts did you have at this point? Like what's racing through your head?
You know, I was in shock at
Okay.
I was in complete shock. So the only thing that I was thinking was still, how can I get away? Even though at this point, I really had no idea how that would happen. So just
Yeah.
waiting and watching. And eventually he came to a stop, and
Right.
he demanded for me to stay still, and he got out of the car. And I knew at that point that I was afraid he was going to jump right back in on top of me, but I figured this was my chance. I had to at least try. So I pulled myself up with my one good arm and I took off. And
Wow. Did he come after you?
I don't know because I barely looked to see if I could see him as I pulled off.
Oh.
I couldn't. I was really focusing on just looking ahead and getting out of there. And I did.
So you were running, I assume, at this point.
No, I was in the car.
Oh, you're
So
oh, oh,
he got out of the car, right? And I pulled myself up with the steering wheel with my
you-
one good arm. Yeah, that's right. So I took off in my car.
wow. So did you what happened? Did you go home? Did you
No, I was new to the area and I just at first, because I had been laying down and I had been so badly hurt, I didn't know where we were exactly. So as I started driving, I realized we were very, very near where I had just been abducted. And
okay.
I knew that we had family friends in the area. So I went to their home,
Yeah.
immediately to their home and pushed by adrenaline. When I got there, I made my way to the front door and they just so happened to be home that afternoon, which was a complete blessing. And when the father answered the door, I clung to him and cried out, "Please help me." And interestingly, I saw the terror on his face and his wife's face as she came running into the room to see what was going on. And I knew I'd found safety. So I basically collapsed and they took me to the emergency room.
So how many years ago was this approximately?
Well, this was right offhand, I'm not sure. I think it was like around 30 years ago.
Okay. How have you moved on? Talk to me about the first 5 years and what that was like, and how did you get through this?
Well, it took time. It took a long time to figure out how to pick up these pieces and because afterwards, everything had changed. So nothing was the same. I
Yeah.
didn't feel the same. I didn't see myself the same. I didn't see those around me the same. I didn't see the world the same anymore. So I had to figure out how to maneuver this whole new reality that I was living. I had reconstructive surgeries after that, physical therapy. My mother was wise enough to get me into trauma therapy, which is so important.
Yes.
And yeah, I mean, it was just a day by day, just trying to survive day by day.
How did I want to go back to something that you said. How did your view of yourself change as a result of this?
I was just so young and naive and wide-eyed, and I had this life I was going to go and live. Suddenly I realized, well, I was broken and I had been a victim of a violent crime.
Yes.
And it just changes you, it breaks you, and now all of a sudden, I didn't feel safe, I was gripped by fear and PTSD. I had serious PTSD after that.
And I would think that you would be it would be very hard to trust anyone, especially anyone new. People from the past that might be a little bit different, but anyone that you knew, I think I would be afraid of, honestly. Did you?
Well, I didn't know him, and so there was that. I think had I known him, sure, that would have definitely been an issue. I didn't trust men. I didn't
Yeah,
trust any men, any man.
understandable. Did you have to ask did the cops ever find out who it was?
No, he was never found. So when I was in the hospital, they asked a lot of questions and they asked the same questions over and over. And I remember asking them, like, why? I already gave you the answer because I'm just trying to hold on to the answer until I give it to them and then let it go. But they kept asking the same things over and over. And I learned that they do that because they want to be sure that your story is consistent. But they
Right.
said that based off of my story and all of the questions that they asked and all of the things that I told them, they said that this man knew what he was doing and he had very likely done it before. And that the likelihood of him being found would be unless he did it, there was a pattern, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah. So if there was a pattern, likely he would get caught. So I lived in fear for a long time that he would come back for me.
Yes. Yes. And I think I would have that same fear if I had gone through that.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's what you went through is horrific. I mean, there's no other word to really describe it. How did you? I know you went to PT, I know you went to trauma therapy, and all that is wonderful and all that is helpful. But ultimately, how did you let yourself move on from this?
Well, it took a lot of time just trying to figure out how to maneuver it. Trauma is unfortunately very common and it happens to families and individuals every day. The problem is most of us just aren't prepared.
Yes.
And then what do you do with it? right? What do you do with it after it happens? I will say that trauma therapy was extremely helpful. It was extremely helpful in that it taught me a good trauma therapist. I mean, I think sometimes that can be hard to find,
Yeah.
but somebody who truly understands what trauma does to the mind and uses evidence-based therapies, which is something that is so important. So talk
Yeah.
therapy isn't necessarily, in my opinion, the answer, but more evidence-based practices
Yep.
help rewire a traumatized brain
Yes.
because physically our brains change during trauma. There is a physical change in the brain and it can be rewired, but you have to know how to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's an excellent point. And I think the other challenge too is, I've talked to other guests about this, is when you go through something like what you went through or what I went through, it- horrific in their own ways, but, vastly different experiences. There's this immediate thought of what do I do with this? Right. And some people just want to forget it ever happened.
Yes.
But what I know from my own experience, again, very different from yours, is that you can't forget it because it becomes a part of you. And, I guess my natural tendency is, I'm a talker. Like I always talk, share stories and all that. But what was hard for me with what I went through is that, and I still struggle with this now, I'll be honest, is how much of it do you share? Because what you went through and what I went through, again, very different, but it's a lot in this time where it seems like trying to get someone to listen to a story is so hard because everyone's like on to the next thing and the next thing, the next thing. That when you have a story that is so personal, that is so important to you, and you know that it should be important to other people, it's very hard if you're trying to share it and people don't listen. And part of the reason that I wanted to start this podcast was to give people a space where they could share. And I can't guarantee that anyone's going to listen to this podcast, but I certainly hope they do because I think there's so much that can be learned, from stories like yours. And I know that from my own experience, like talking about it, what I went through has been a form of therapy because it lets you get it out of your head. It lets you over time learn how to put it into perspective. What happened to me happened just about it's like 20 months ago. So I'm much closer to mine what happened to me than you are to what happened to you. But I know that the further I get from it, I talk about it in different ways, And I know for me, there are things that I have elected to share, and there are things that I will never talk about based upon what I went through because it's just too much. And I think that that's a decision. Everyone's story is a personal account, and I think everybody has to share what they're comfortable sharing. So I very much appreciate you sharing everything that you did today.
Thank you.
Um, and for people that are listening, what advice do you have for them, for people that are just stuck? You worked through something that, I think this is fair to say, that would permanently break most people. And God bless you, you managed to get through it. You learned to trust men again. You got married. You have a daughter. Like, that's amazing. What advice do you have for people?
Well, advice is interesting. I would just say I've run across a lot of people over the years who have done exactly what you had just mentioned, where they don't want to confront it. So they want to push it away. It's big. Sometimes our traumas can be so large. We don't know how to wrap our mind around it.
Right.
And it's easier just to try to push it away.
It
And
is.
in time, you realize that doesn't really work.
Yes.
Right. But for me, it was different because I was so determined. So what I learned was we have to choose to heal, right? Nobody can do it for us.
That's
But
right.
in choosing to heal, we have to be willing to do the hard work. We have to be willing to confront our fears and stay determined, even when it feels impossible, because it will at some point feel
Yeah.
impossible. But you have to be determined to stick with it if you want to get to the other side.
Yes. Yes.
And for me, part of that was trauma therapy with a good trauma therapist, evidence-based therapy where there's proven methods. Today, now they have EMDR. They didn't have EMDR then. I used something that my therapist taught me, just cognitive behavioral therapy
Yep. Yep.
and
Yep.
filter therapy as well. So I had to go back to that mall by myself and go back around in the back of the mall, park in as close to the same parking space that I could by myself, get out, go in the same door, and then come back out. And that was very difficult. But after I did that, I realized, okay, yeah, you know what? I did it and I wasn't abducted
Yes.
again. So that's really important. And then for me, a huge part of it is think you have to really seek and understand what you believe. And so for
Yeah.
me, a big part of it was faith.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, faith cannot be under, I mean, the importance of it is just incredibly important. And I think faith in the universe, faith in whatever one believes in, and faith in yourself.
Mhm.
I think is really important. And I also think, I know for me at least, like community has been really important, finding people that you can talk to, who you consider, who you consider your people. I know I have a couple of girlfriends who, showed up in ways that I mean, truly never imagined for me. And that was such a game changer. I don't think I mean, honestly, there are a few people specifically, I don't think I could have gotten through it without them. I mean, honestly, because it wasn't necessarily, and I don't know if you had this experience, I'm curious, it was that they were just there, and they were just there to talk with about anything, whether I wanted to talk about how I felt that day health wise, or whether I wanted to talk about, what was going on with their kids or my kids. They were just there to talk and to listen with no agenda. And I felt like that was, for me, that was just so incredibly important. Did you have people that helped you along your journey like that?
Yeah, I was really very fortunate to have a family that was incredibly supportive and that really made all the difference. For me, it was hard because with other people, because I was 21, right?
Right.
So my
Right.
friends were also young. So nobody really knew how to handle that. So that was hard. And also I felt like, nobody understands because nobody did understand. And people mean well, but sometimes say the wrong things. And so that I experienced a lot of that as well. But just, things like, I don't know, what were you wearing or different, which should never be a question,
No,
right? It doesn't really matter. Or were you raped? Or just all those things that people want to know. I mean, they mean well.
yes.
So for me, I just think I felt very alienated.
Okay.
And a big part of that help for me was the therapy.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Okay, well, I'm emotionally overwhelmed from today. But I just want to thank you for sharing part one of your incredible story. And I know there is part two. And so for everyone listening, you're going to have to wait for part two. Because Tess is going to talk about in our next conversation, not only more about kind of how she's evolved, but some of the great work that she was sort of talking about before, that she did in the Middle East subsequently in subsequent years. But Tess, before we end, I just wanted to learn a little bit more about the book that you wrote and where people can find that.
Okay, so I wrote my book years later. I had been encouraged to write this book for years, but found every excuse not to write the book until finally one day I realized it was time. So the name of my book is Abducted in Broad Daylight. If I just show a picture of it here real quick.
Love that. Thank you.
It is a trauma survivor's story through trauma, healing, and finding purpose in unexpected places. It is on Amazon.
Okay.
So you can find it on Amazon or you can find it on my website, tessmillay.com.
Wonderful. Well, thank you.
Thank
From
you.
the bottom of my heart. This was fascinating. And I'm just so glad you're here. And I appreciate you sharing the story and the details that you did. And just thank you for being you. And I look forward to our next conversation.
Well,
Um,
thank you so much.
it's truly my pleasure. And I'm just sorry that you had to go through that, but I'm so appreciative that you've come out on the other side in the way that you have. So thank you. Okay, everyone. Well, thanks for listening to another episode of Gut Punch. And I look forward to chatting with you all again soon. Bye-bye.
That's it for today's episode of Gut Punch. I hope you found inspiration, because no matter how hard life hits, there's always a way forward. Make sure to follow or subscribe to Gut Punch on your favorite podcast platform. If you know someone who could use a little inspiration, share this episode with them. Thanks for listening, and until next time, stay strong. See you in the next episode.